Hey everybody, Lawrence here with 30 Basic Terrain, coming at you with another one. Mushrooms. Classic piece of scenery. You can make them as big as you want or as little as you want. They can be used as decorative pieces for bases or terrain. You can actually make them to be the scenery, large enough to be scattered terrain and the scenery themselves. There are multiple settings you can use in forest, Underdark. I know a lot of people love using them in Underdark, but there's no really wrong way to make mushrooms, and you can make them in different styles, different heights, whatever you want to do. Well, I want to do a series of videos here focusing on mushrooms and the different techniques and different sizes and ways to build them. Now, in this first video, I made more of like a undead, foresty type giant mushrooms, but I didn't go with the bright colors that you normally see. I went with a more muted style. But I want to walk you through the process of how I made this particular style, and eventually I'll show other styles of mushrooms. But before we get to it, I want to give a big shout out and thanks to my Patreon members, Dungeon Matron, Corel, Mia Geeked, and Sykes. Your guys' financial support really helps with purchasing of different materials and stuff that I need to make videos. And I can't thank you guys enough. All right, everyone, let's get to it. Now here I'm just chunking up a piece of 3-inch thick XPS that I have. You can use thinner and layer it up if you want to. Later methods will cover up any seam, so it's not that big a deal. But I'm just getting in rough shapes for what I need for later. Now here I'm just getting a rough shape of the mushroom caps themselves, just trimming off small pieces. You want to go thinner, smaller on the top and bigger at the bottom. So I'm carving angle cuts from the top down to the bottom, thicker at the top. The cuts I'm making is thicker at the top and thinner at the bottom. So I'm going to have that semi-classic mushroom cap shape eventually. And then I'll round off the top a little bit. But just take off thin pieces and it'll get there eventually. Now, of course, I need somewhere for the stems to go, but I don't want it to be completely flat, so I'm just going to carve out at an angle here with my X-Acto blade and slowly just cut away until I have an indentation where I can eventually insert the mushroom stem. Now I think this is 1.5-inch thick foam, and I want to start carving down squarish chunks for the stems. Once I get that rough square shape, I just eventually want to start carving it down to a semi-round shape. Doesn't have to be perfect. Matter of fact, it shouldn't be perfect. And just keep carving, test fitting till it gets to a point where I think it'll fit. Carve around off the top a little bit, and done. Now, I don't want like any sharp edges like down at the bottom, so I'm just roughly shaving off a little bit just so it has a little more of a rounded edge to it, so we don't want any sharp corners on a plant. And this is a plant. Well, fungus actually, but now this step I could probably have skipped totally, but I'm just adding some texture lines to the underside of the cap, because a lot of mushrooms have, those like fins or veins or gills like texture on the underneath of their cap. Now here I want to actually smooth out the caps and the stems. I don't want any of those little angles or edges to show, at least not at this stage. So I'm just taking some sandpaper and sanding them till it's relatively smooth to my satisfaction. Again, I'm sanding the caps, and then I'm also going to sand the stems as well, just to give it a smoother, more natural appearance. Now that I've got them all sanded, I want to attach them together. And I'm going to use this toothpick to attach from the stem to the cap, just to make it a little more sturdy. And a little dab of hot glue, push them together, and boom, done. Now with this one I'm gonna pre-punch the holes just to make it easier, but I'll still get that extra strength from the toothpick. Now, some of these bases I want to be elevated. So I'm hot gluing a chunk of foam to one of the bases, and I'm just going to start carving away for the chunk of foam till I get to a rough area of what I want. And again, as usual, I'm only taking away small chunks. And this particular base I want to be at an angle, but you can have it go straight up or whatever direction you want. And again, I know this makes a big mess, but it's always better to take off small chunks. Now, I want to make sure the stem will still have room, so I trace around it at the top just to make sure that there will still be enough space at the top to attach the mushroom. And I'm also going to be, just kind of like carving chunks out to give it a little more visual interest. Do you have to do this? No. But again, this is just to do interest. And I want to give it some layer lines, so I'm using my plastic grout brush just to give it a lot of visual interest for layer lines and stuff. Like, the soil is built up in layers over time. And now that I've got that done, a little dab of hot glue, and boom, got it done. Now I want to put, the classic little bumps on these mushroom caps, and I'm using these like half circle sticker things I got from the Dollar Tree. It's just a matter of peeling them off and sticking them anywhere on the cap that I think, hey, that looks good or pretty. But is the adhesive gonna keep it there forever? No, but later steps will actually keep them in place for as long as you have the terrain. Now I want to start adding a little bit of texture to the bases that aren't elevated or anywhere that the wooden base is showing through. So I'm just using my homemade texture paste, link in the description, just to basically, so I don't have a flat looking base. I want this to look interesting. So this is a simple process. I'm just brushing it on, literally. I have an old beater brush, and just anywhere that I think it needs to be, the texture paste needs to go, I'm putting it. Unfortunately, I forgot to record the next step. I took some hot glue and went from the base of the stems and made pseudo tendrils, vines, or roots, whatever you want to call it, from the base of the mushroom to spread out over the rest of the base. But I forgot to record it, so sorry. I want to add some texture to the caps. So I'm going to take chunks of non-textured, basic, cheap bathroom tissue and attach it to the caps with some watered down PVA. It can get a little messy, but it's no big deal. I'm just basically brushing on the PVA onto the bathroom tissue, and it'll stick on there and give it like all veiny, grimy texture throughout the cap, and it'll definitely give it some visual interest, because I personally don't want to go for a perfectly smooth looking cap. Now, I was given this a while ago from a friend, and I figured, I'm going to try and use this. I want to give the stem some texture, so I'm using some Citadel Technical Sterling mud. It has like a sandy grit texture to it. The roots, I'm also going to use a product I was given by the same friend. It's Agar Earth. Looks like a smoother mud. Just to give the hot glue roots a little extra, and so paint will also adhere better to it. Pretty simple, pretty quick, pretty easy. Now it's time to add some color to this. I'm just priming everything black with my airbrush. You can use black Mod Podge, or if you're careful, rattle can, because the raised base parts aren't protected with anything. But With all the extra stuff I've put on, I figured I can skip black Mod Podge and just go straight airbrush primer. And here now I'm giving all the mushrooms a zenithal highlight with a gray, mid-tone gray paint, or light gray, but this is just basically hitting it at an angle with your airbrush. And if you don't have an airbrush, you can easily do this with a dry brush on a gray. Just basically go from top and work your way down. It's pretty simple, but it's quick, it's easy, and it'll make highlighting the mushrooms or your terrain a lot easier later. And here I'm giving the mushrooms an additional zenithal highlight with a white. I wanted this to be a little bit more grainy looking, to be a little more natural for the plants themselves, so I decided to go with a brush. I didn't want it to be like perfectly smooth. I just wanted it to look a little bit rough, so I'm going from top to bottom with the dry brushing, not from bottom to top. I just wanted it to look like a highlight. Now here I'm using a custom blackish brown watered down paint that I added some jet dry to it just to give it more of like a wash texture or consistency to it. Just so it'll get it, the darkest parts of the paint will go straight into all the cracks and crevices, and this is a wash, really. I basically made a quick wash, like I said, black, brown, and water, and jet dry. Now for the cats here, I decided to go with like a swampy green color because I'm just going for like very toned down colors for these mushrooms. Just make them look dirty and ugly and nasty. But I went with the same method I did for the brown. Just some green paint, some water, and a little bit of jet dry just to make it flow better. Basically, a really cheap, quick wash. And I am going to cover the entire cap with this. And once again, I made a quick homemade wash of some brown and ochre, just to give it like a yellowish, brownish look to it. And I'm going to be hitting all the little bumps on the caps, and then I'm going to hit the stems and all the roots with this color. This is just a base coat, but I'm going for like trying to get as 100% coverage with this as I possibly can. Now for all the dirt areas, I'm going to be doing an overbrush with a burnt umber, or basically a dark brown, because the base coat was like all but black. So this is just like 85–80% coverage, leaving all the deepest recesses alone, just going over a quick overbrush. And here I'm going to be overbrushing all the green parts of the caps with a light green. And again, this is just like an 85% coverage, just to bring up all the highlights and leave all the deepest recesses alone. And now it's time for all the little bumps and the stems and the roots. I'm using a true ochre color to do the same process of an overbrush. But again, once again, this is like an 80-85% coverage, leaving the deepest parts and recesses and cracks alone. And here I want to use a light tan color just to dry brush all the dirt areas and just bring up all the highest edges and make it pop a little bit more than what it does. This is just real quick. I'm using a cheap makeup brush I got from the Dollar Tree. I'm not going to spend a lot of money on something that we beat the ever-loving heck out of. And dry brushes do get beat a lot, so if you can find a decent makeup brush that's relatively cheap on Amazon, Temu, wherever, or the Dollar Tree like I do, that's what you want to use. Now I'm going to wash everything. I have my homemade dark brown wash, link in the description how to make the wash. And I'm just going to coat everything with this dark brown wash just to make it grungy, a little more grungy than what it already looks. And go into the recesses and the shadows and just eventually it'll make everything pop a little bit more. Now that the wash is all dry, I'm going to go back and do a little bit of highlight dry brushing. First, I'm going to hit all the dirt areas with that final light tan that I originally used. And just to make it pop a little more and for visual interest. I said, everything we do is for visual interest. Now for the caps, I want to do a little bit different color than what I finished off with. So I'm mixing the light green and the true ochre together, and I'm going to dry brush all the highlights out of that just to get a color that I actually want. And in a way, make it blend, the whole piece more blend together. But again, this is a highlight dry brush just from the top down. Most of my brush strokes are going down. And now for all the bumps and the stems and roots, I'm going with the true ochre and just doing a quick highlight dry brush to make them pop a little bit more, but still leave a little bit of that dingy nasty around the edges from the wash. I wasn't entirely happy with that last dry brush I did on the caps themselves, so I went with a straight ochre, the true ochre color, and just did a quick highlight dry brush on them again, and that actually, the final product made me happy. So that's what I went with. Now in different areas, I want to do some flocking, any flat areas or anywhere that I think grass would have just naturally grown. So I'm using some watered down PVA 50-50 mix, and then I'm going to sprinkle on my standard 3 different colors. I'll sprinkle on earth, burnt grass, and yellow for a highlight, just to mix up so it's not one solid color. But as you can see right now, I'm just brushing on the PVA, and then I'll sprinkle on the flocking. It's pretty simple, pretty easy. I wanted to add a little bit of dirt and dust and shadows to certain areas, so I'm using my homemade pigment powder, link in the description, and just brushing it on at different areas that I think it could use it, and will make it look better. And after you brush it on, I'm going to give it a quick spot of some isopropyl alcohol to set it in. Now that all the flocking is dry, or close enough to dry, I want to start adding some grass tufts, just again, for a little more visual interest. You could have skipped this and it would have been fine, but just that little extra. And you can see how they turned out. I'm actually really happy with it. Would I do anything different? Maybe, maybe not, but it's my terrain, so. But I think they look really well in like a deep, dark, swampy setting. These will be absolutely perfect. Giant mushroom forest in a swamp. Why not? But I have a decent variety I can use and put on the table, and they're going to look good. And I'm happy with them, so. Everybody, if you made it this far, it means you watch it again. As always, I really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you liked it, hit the thumbs up, click subscribe. I'm putting out more videos as much as I can. If you want to get a hold of me directly, there's a link to Discord down below. If you guys make these mushrooms, come to the Discord, post pictures. I would love to see them. But as always, guys, when you're making your terrain, whether it be mushrooms or anything, remember, the only people you got to worry about is you, because it's your terrain.